Sokol pleaded not guilty to all the charges and will stand trial.
You guilty of anything, man?
And then we have Jeffrey Sokol with attorney Pattis, who I think is meeting with his client. All right, so we're here on the matter of Jeffrey Sokol. Mr. Sokol, on an earlier date, entered pleas to a series of charges, and following that, the probation department prepared a pre-sentence report regarding the case. This is a matter where the court indicated a cap sentence of 7 years suspended after 3 years and 10 years of probation, with the right for the defense to argue for a lesser sentence. So starting with the pre-sentence report, does the state have any issues with the information in the report?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, and Attorney Pattis, any issues from the defense side?
Only one, sir, with respect to the current offense in the third paragraph.
Okay.
The last complete sentence says, it appeared that Sokol ingested a Cialis pill.
Right.
This has been the source of some dispute you'll recall throughout the proceedings. It was, in fact, a cholesterol pill. And so, I understand that probation officer Hesbit did law enforcement by focusing on the appearance. And I don't want to litigate an immaterial issue, and so I guess I'm requesting that the following be added, a sentence. The defendant reports it was, in fact, cholesterol, Cholestipol, a medication taken for bowel irritation.
Okay, I'll add that sentence.
And that's related to his Crohn's disease, Judge.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Beyond that, there are no additions or corrections.
Okay, and Mr. Sokol, you had a chance to go over this report?
Yes.
And other than what Attorney Pattis mentioned, is the other information on the report accurate information?
Yeah.
Okay, and let me make this notation for a second. Okay. Attorney Zingaro, would you like to make some sentencing remarks?
Yes, Your Honor. As the court is aware, this case, along with a number of others, was born out of an investigation of potential perpetrators that were looking to have sex with the underage 13-year-old girl. And we've sort of analyzed a number of these cases with regard to the facts of culpability here. And I think just wanted to point out to the court why the state believes that the cap of 7 after 3 and 10 years probation is appropriate in this case. The defendant traveled down from Brookline, Massachusetts. It's about 3 hours away in order to facilitate this interaction with what he believed to be a 13-year-old girl down into Fairfield, Connecticut. In addition, I think some of the things that were concerning was the research with regard to the Connecticut general statutes and trying to find out what the potential ramifications of actions such as these certainly show an intent to engage. It would show an intent to cover up, intent to avoid punishment if necessary with regard to his actions. So it was not something that was sort of a spur of the moment type of thing and something that engaged in almost in a more impulsive sort of way. This was something that was planned, and it took some effort in order to facilitate it. In addition, the two other factors I think it's important for the court to consider with regard to sentencing are the conversation with regard to trying to get the underage person to get permission from a parent for him to engage in sex with her, as well as, the bringing of vodka to the scene in order to have them also consume the alcohol. So the factors I think that the court can consider, it is not only that it is the intentionalness and the planning and the intent to engage in this type of behavior. And that is why, with regard to the cap and the floor, it's the state's position that the cap is appropriate under the circumstances. And I'll leave the rest to the court. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I should indicate that Attorney Pattis provided me with 4 letters on behalf of Mr. Sokol. One from a physician, another from an attorney, another from a neighbor, and a 4th one from his uncle. I've read those letters in addition to the pre-sentence report, so...
And, Your Honor, the state did have an opportunity to look at those.
Good. So, Attorney Pattis, would you like to make some remarks?
Well, I think Mr. Sokol would like to address you, and then I'd like to round up, Judge.
Sure.
And I neglected in that packet to include the letter from his father. His father and mother are here, but I'll speak on the father's behalf.
Okay, so go right ahead, Mr. Sokol.
Thanks. I just prepared a statement. I'm a little bit nervous, so.
Okay, sure.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I just want to express to the court with the utmost sincerity that this crime does not in any way define who I am. I'm deeply sorry for what I did. And I realize the severity and potential my actions could have caused. This was a one-time offense in discussion and exception to who I am. And I realize it's a huge mistake that I made. My family and friends have stood by me throughout the whole process. They still invite me into their homes and socialize with me, just like they did before, and I'm thankful for that. You can also see these sentiments in those letters that you have. For the past year and a half, I've tried really hard to become a better person. I volunteer at the aquarium and at the fire department up in Boston. I practice martial arts, and I play tennis weekly. And I've certainly tried to stay away from trouble. The other issue I wanted to stress is how I'm perceived in the video that you saw. You may have noticed my demeanor, and you may have thought that I had an attitude that displayed no fear or not caring. I want to tell you, Your Honor, this does not reflect who I am. I realize that I was in a serious situation, but my way of dealing with stress, mental trauma, and shock, and not knowing what will happen next is one of showing very little emotion and staying calm. In fact, I may have tried to lighten the situation by making a joke, but this was actually a way to release my stress, something that I normally do under situations like this of high stress, high anxiety. I very rarely raise my voice in adverse situations. So if you see in all the video, I never do that. I pretty much, stay the same demeanor. This way of dealing with matters may have come off as arrogant or smug, and I understand that. But my intent was surely not to be that way. I'm working on my issues in therapy, and I realize I may have reacted differently than others in this thing. But I hope the court agrees that it shouldn't make me any more guilty.
I'm not holding any of that against you at all.
Thank you. I can assure you that this profound indiscretion will never happen again. I was professionally evaluated via forensics testing, which was deemed normal. In terms of the crime, I've been publicly humiliated, being shown on TV multiple times and across the internet. It's stressful not knowing who might know that this happened among the people that I regularly associated with or run into occasionally. These are embarrassing scenarios in itself. It is an extremely heavy punishment just being in those scenarios. Your Honor, I'm prepared to accept and respect your decision regarding my fate, and I hope you can take into account what I've said today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Judge, I'm the third lawyer in this case that through no difficulty of Mr. Sokol. He had initially had Diane Poland, and who is now, as you know, deceased. And I believe that has done... She began to struggle with her health issues. This case was more than she could handle. And then, Mr. Sokol then went briefly to Attorney Belinky, and this case may have been more than he could handle for other issues. It has been a difficult case for me because I believe in the profound and deep goodness of this man, and I can identify a lot with his awkwardness. I was struck in reading the letters and in speaking to his mother and father, who are here, and meeting with them on prior occasions. A certain ineptness that's easy to misread in Mr. Sokol. I sometimes think I share the same ineptness, and that's why I became a trial lawyer. And I'm over the top. You know, if I come in here with long hair and aggressive, I can't control what you think about me. I don't have to worry what you think. And Jeff can sometimes appear cold, as he did in the video. And I know you're not going to hold against him and uncaring, but if I could put a little bit of what he did in some historical context. And this context is not intended to justify what he did. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that. But there was a time in this country where the age of consent was as low as 9 years old. And that was in colonial Maryland. And other ages were 11, 12, and 13 throughout the United States. And that changed in the 1800s as a result of lobbying by the women's temperance movement, who feared that its population migrated from farms into urban areas Young women were unsupervised for being taken advantage of. We know that the law is what it is. And Mr. Sokol knows he violated it. But for the state to suggest it took elaborate planning of a cunning and inculpatory sort for him doing that research is almost to make little of the unique history we have with sex offenses in the United States. We urge to procreate, the urge to be close, the urge for intimacy defines it to the species, and how we deal with that makes criminals of some of us. And Jeff has accepted that responsibility. So I don't think that he's everything that the state made him out to be. And when I read the letters that were written on his behalf, I'm quite moved by them. And I think some of the people who are close to him, who hope to invite him to their home, they share time with their children, will have a rude awakening when they realize that the terms and conditions of probation are probably to make that impossible. And Mr. Sokol knows he's going into prison today. He knows that when he leaves, he's going to have to participate in treatment. We did not enter an Alford plea in this case, even though there are certain things that we disagree with in the state's presentation. Mr. Sokol has and begun the process of rehabilitation. And what I learned in the report that was generated by Leo Keating is that he has a low risk to reoffend. That when giving objective tests, and this is a person certified in the use of a penile plethysmograph as well. When given tests to score his desires, she didn't sense an inviting interest in children. What you see is a young man who had some learning difficulties and learned to mask them with an aggressive presentation itself. At Springfield College, he left. It didn't work out. He went to UMass Amherst and he got his sports management degree and then succeeded in his profession. But he didn't succeed in love. And he didn't succeed in the thing that defines us and gives us most comfort. A brief marriage that lasted for a year at 32. He thinks it was a mistake. And why? What did he tell the probation officer about getting married? He married because he was worried he'd never get another chance at intimacy. And so the desire to be close to another, it defines us. You've seen the OCD, or you've read about it, if not seen it. He suffered from Crohn's disease, which presented him with obstacles even in high school. And you know, Crohn's disease is a disabling and sometimes an often painful bowel disease. And you learn that even in high school, he had a mask on. That mask was a grimace of pain that made people think he was standoffish. I think the best thing that I can say about Mr. Sokol, as he stands here before you, is that this conviction is a signal for those close to him that he does need their loving support. And you can see from the letters and from the presence of his family here today, who are just wonderful people. I'm hoping they'll adopt me. That he will get that love and support. So I know that as you look at these cases, you want to praise similarly situated people, similarly in the market and human suffering, that declared certain values for people in this case based on their range of culpability. You have a first-time offender with no criminal history, no real substance abuse issues, a modest psychiatric history. In other words, he's not psychotic or even near psychotic. He's got another character disorder. But he's got some quirks, and he's going to need some treatment, and he's getting that treatment. He is inside-oriented, presented no difficulties to the court throughout the course of probation, has been perfectly responsive to everything that I've required of him, and who enjoys the loving support of people who've known him for a lifetime. I wish I could walk him out the door here today, but I know I can't. It's a 9-year mandatory minimum. And something suggests to me he'll be sentenced to more than the minimum. But how much more, Judge, is the difficult call in this case, in my view. Because Mr. Sokol broke the law, and he broke the law by engaging in conduct that wouldn't have been a crime a century ago. And it is now. And he had reason to know it, and so he did it. And he deserves punishment, and he's told you he's prepared to accept it. But I'm asking for something well below the cap, Judge. I don't want to bid against myself, but I think the cap is far too high on this case. With respect to the terms and conditions of probation, I've reviewed the PSI with him, and this is me talking, not him. I'm not at all sure that the 7th condition is warranted in this case, that Mr. Sokol submit to random urine samples. There's no indication of an ongoing problem with alcohol or drugs. There is a suggestion that a year or so ago he may have smoked some marijuana. That could probably be said of all sorts of people in this courthouse, if not in this courtroom. I wouldn't go that far. So I would ask that the court may be that, it could be a scholar, and he has a few too many beers one night. I don't want to see a probation officer jumping under you. He's not the town drunk, not even close. So we're asking for some leniency, Judge. I know we were late to come in. That's largely me. I was the 3rd lawyer in, and I always delay things. I'm always hoping on a better day the state will come to its senses and realize that prison's really not the answer. But I didn't succeed today.
Okay, Mr. Sokol's parents?
Judge, may I have 1 second?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol would like to comment on one thing I said.
Sure.
Would you permit that, sir?
Sure.
Yes, one. I have to say, one of the driving forces in going to meet this young girl is that I have been lonely for a while. And she had given me lots of attention, obviously, which she has seen. Now, and that's just what I wanted to say, that I had a lot going on in my life, and loneliness is a big part of it.
Okay.
Even though it was the wrong decision.
Right. So the fundamental idea behind these cases and the fundamental idea behind these laws is that children need protection. That 13-year-old girls that get involved in sexual relations is harmful to them. It's actually quite harmful to them. And whether we learn more about it in 100 years, I don't know. But I do know now that these kids that get involved in these things, their recklessness it's not good for them. They end up being sometimes promiscuous themselves. They end up getting into trouble. They end up getting into substance abuse situations. They end up getting arrested. They end up in a lot of bad places. And I'm not saying it's 100% more than that, but the sexual encounters are actually a part of it because it destroys their sense of self. They feel they're worthless, and it has a lot of bad things associated with it. Look, you drove 150 miles from Brookline, Massachusetts to Fairfield, Connecticut. And if a real 13-year-old girl is on the other side of that door and you walked in there, in my view, with that bottle of vodka and had sex with her if you could have. I mean, I think that's what really would have happened there. I know you said different. But my perception of the whole thing, given the salacious text that preceded this, and the whole dynamic of this, was what was going on. And you were over 40 at the time of this. You believed this person was 13. But look, Mr. Sokol, I'm not unmindful of your accomplishments, your education, your support of your family, the things you've done, and I'm not discounting that. I'm not saying you're the worst person on the face of the earth. I'm not saying this is the worst thing that, look, a person should not be evaluated by the worst thing they ever did in their life. That should not be the sum total of their whole situation. I understand that. But look, my job is to look at the big picture here. And the big picture here includes what I consider to be like with these other people. Well, I mean, each one is an individual, but this is serious stuff. So, I believe the following sentence is required on the matter of state against Jeffrey Sokol. And this is under docket number CR 151-502-86776. On the charge of attempt to commit sexual assault in the second degree, the defendant is sentenced to 7 years suspended after 30 months and 10 years of probation. On the charge of attempted risk of injury to a child, the defendant is sentenced to a concurrent sentence of 30 months, and on the sentence of attempting to entice a minor into an obscene performance, a concurrent sentence of 30 months. Total effective sentence, 7 years suspended after 30 months and 10 years of probation. The defendant will be required to register as a sex offender under Connecticut law for a period of 10 years. And the SAVA fine of $151 is imposed, as are other court costs and fees. I'm going to impose the special conditions of probation that were listed in the probation department PSI, but I'll eliminate number 7. I agree with Mr. Pattis. There's no indication that substance abuse played a role in this offense, so that is not necessary for his probation evaluation. So I'd now ask the state to give a brief statement for the record for the purposes of the sex offender registry.
Yes, Your Honor. As the court indicated, these were attempted, but it was based upon an intent to have sex with an underage 13-year-old girl. The day of the incident was October of 2015. At that time, the defendant believed the person to be 13 years of age.
And the defendant was approximately how old at the time?
Approximately, I believe. Let me just double check. I believe he was 46 at the time.
44.
He's 45 now, so say 44.
Oh, 44 at the time. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. You're going to get a notice of your right to have this sentence reviewed by the Sentence Review Division of our court. You have the right to apply for a pardon and the other material regarding the sex offender registry. Okay. Thank you very much. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, Judge.
I'd buy myself a mocha latte too, instead of singing these bohemian blues about the very same spot and a different time, when painters painted and poets rhymed. So please forgive this nostalgic fool. He used to be young and he used to be cool.